In today's video, we are going to talk about loops in JavaScript. Loops are an essential part of any programming language because they allow us to repeat a block of code multiple times without having to write it over and over. There are several types of loops in JavaScript, and we're going to go over each one step by step with code examples so you can understand how they work and when to use them. First, let's start with the for loop. The for loop is one of the most commonly used loops in JavaScript. It allows you to run a block of code a specific number of times. Here we have a simple example of for loop. Let's break this down. First, we have the initialization. Let I is equal to 0. This is where we set up a variable, I, to keep track of how many times the loop has run. Next, we have the condition, I less than 5. This condition is checked every time the loop runs. As long as I is less than 5, the loop will continue running. Finally, we have the increment, I++. This is where I is increased by 1 after each loop iteration. So, when this loop runs, the variable I starts at 0 and increases by 1 in each iteration. The loop stops when I reaches 5, and we'll see 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 printed to the console. Next, let's talk about the while loop. The while loop is another way to repeat a block of code, but instead of running a set number of times, it keeps going as long as a condition is true. Here's the basic syntax of a while loop. In this example, we start by declaring a variable I and setting it to 0. Then we have the condition, I, 5. The loop will keep running as long as I is less than 5. Inside the loop, we print I to the console, and then we increase I by 1. The loop will continue until I is no longer less than 5. In this case, it will stop after printing 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, let's talk about the do-while loop. The do-while loop is similar to the while loop, but with one important difference. The code inside the loop is executed at least once, even if the condition is false from the start. Here's how it works. In this example, the loop will print I to the console and then increase I by 1. After that, it checks the condition I is less than 5. This loop will behave just like a while loop, printing 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But the key difference is that the loop always runs at least once, even if the condition is false from the beginning. Now, let's talk about the for-of loop. The for-of loop is used to iterate over iterable objects like arrays, strings, or sets. It allows you to loop through the values of an array or any iterable object. For example, let's say you have an array of names. In this example, we declare a variable name to represent each element in the names array. The for-of loop will go through each value in the array, one by one, and assign it to name. So this loop will print Alice, Bob, and Charlie to the console. The for-of loop is very useful when you want to work directly with the values in an array or other iterable objects. Next, let's talk about the for-in loop. The for-in loop is used to iterate over the properties of an object. Instead of looping through values like for-of, it loops through the keys or property names of an object. Let's say you have an object representing a person. In this example, the for-in loop goes through each property name or key in the person object. The variable key will represent each property name, like name, age, or city. We can then use person key to access the value for each key. This loop will print name Alice, age 25, and city New York. Now, let's talk about using break and continue in loops. Sometimes, you might want to stop a loop early or skip over certain iterations. This is where the break and continue statements come in. Using break to stop a loop. The break statement allows you to immediately exit a loop, even if the loop condition hasn't been met yet. Here we have an example. In this case, the loop starts at 0 and runs until I is 5. When I equals 5, the break statement is triggered, and the loop stops. So it will print 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then stop when I reaches 5. Using continue to skip an iteration. The continue statement allows you to skip the rest of the code in the current iteration and move on to the next iteration. Here we have an example. In this case, when I equals 2, the continue statement is triggered, and the loop immediately jumps to the next iteration. So the number 2 is skipped, and the loop continues with 3, 4, and so on. As a result, this loop will print 0, 1, 3, and 4, but it will skip 2. Finally, let's summarize what we've learned to summarize. The for loop runs a block of code a specific number of times. The while loop runs as long as a condition is true. The do-while loop guarantees the block of code runs at least once, even if the condition is false. The for of loop allows you to loop over the values in an array or other iterable objects. The for in loop lets you loop through the keys or properties of an object. The break statement stops a loop early, and the continue statement skips over an iteration. Loops are an essential tool in programming, and knowing when and how to use each type of loop will help you write cleaner, more efficient code. Thank you for watching. If you found this explanation helpful, please subscribe for more. See you next time.